Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. And if my connection starts acting up again, Steve will give me a sign of some kind. um, so I'm Carly Lawrence. I'm the Deputy City Manager for Golden. I am familiar with several of you, have worked with you before, and happy to see some people that have been in some of our other meetings again. So the general layout of this will be a short presentation, and then we will have time for questions and feedback, and really want to have most of our time to listen to what you all have to say and answer any questions you have. And I'm, of course, with Steve Glick, who I know most of you know as well. And so he'll be kind of jumping in wherever it's needed. So I see several of you have turned on your videos. That's great. Anybody wants to turn on their video, you're welcome to. And when we're talking, just try to keep yourself on mute until it's your turn to talk. And then also, we're going to be using the chat feature. So if you want to hit the chat, make sure it's to everyone. When you have comments later in the meeting, it's nice for us to see exactly what the comments were, and we can put them in our Post-it notes. So if you use the chat feature to everyone, we can transfer those over easily. But we'd also love to hear your voice too. So you can always do that with the Post-it note. So I will start our short presentation. Okay. So you are in a Heart of Golden meeting. This project really came about. The agenda. I will talk about the agenda first. First, we're going to kind of talk about how we got here and next steps in the process, potential next steps. And then we're also going to talk about the survey and concepts that we have out on Guiding Golden currently. We also had a walking tour last weekend, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, as I said, we're going to save most of our time for us to have kind of a group discussion. So how we got here, of course, this group knows more than anyone, all the different steps and all the different history that kind of has led us to this point. But this particular project really came about by Miller Coors selling their property east of Ford Street, and the city really looking at that as an opportunity to really realize the potential of the Creek Corridor and open up a lot of different options for us. So the office building was there, and we were able to do a feasibility study before the purchase of the property and building, and we determined that that building was no longer worth using. It was very outdated and had a lot of aging systems. And so even though we found all of that stuff out, City Council really decided that this opens up so much potential. This is worth the purchase of this land, and we can really figure out what to do in the coming years. So we really focused on vision and, kind of going back to these questions of what does your dream corridor look like, and what uses would you like to see and where, and what uses are most important to you. So even in this stage right here, we're really looking at what is kind of the skeleton of this idea look like? What is the base plan? And then as we move further and further along the process, we'll be able to really bring all those pieces to life and get a lot of feedback for each of those parts and say, what could this be, and what are the different variations, and what are the different phases of what this project could look like? So we were able to have some in-person and online engagement on this visioning questions. And then we started to move into refining, so kind of bringing ideas forward to get feedback on and really talking through those ideas. And that was part of our refining stage, talking about where key features should be located, what are we missing, what do we need to add, and asking questions like, does this match what your vision is? So we really had started that when the pandemic started back in March, and we had one in-person meeting and lots of online engagement since then. But this is our latest effort to gather input on this next phase. And of course, we've been meeting with boards and commissions, stakeholder groups such as yourself. We're really excited about this stakeholder group at the potential of having all of you with all of your knowledge about Golden and having served Golden already, really engaging with you on more projects in the future. So this is kind of just the beginning of what we hope is a really great avenue to collect feedback from really engaged stakeholders in our community. And then, of course, getting a lot of feedback on guiding Golden. We've been doing surveys, discussions, and then map-specific input. So potential next steps. Right now, we're in this Heart of Golden phase of designs with feedback. So we just recently had 3 more designs come out to get feedback on. And as I said, we're really looking at these as brainstorming ideas, saying, here's what we heard from the community. What do you think about this part or that part? And what should we move forward into this process? And what doesn't need to be moved forward? So we're continuing that throughout this year. And then we're going to also be looking at Clear Creek management specifically and focusing on the creek and traffic flow and those types of things that have to do with the creek. Both short term and then the longer term, which we hope Heart of Golden has more integration of those topics as well. So we'll be working on that through the winter and a little bit of the spring. And then we're hoping that we can pick this project back up and keep collecting feedback and do some more focus groups, stakeholder groups, polling, and then maybe move into the funding and selecting phases of this project. Now, this is a very hard time to predict any of the future, and so we don't know if that's going to be next year. Next year might look a little different. It might be the year after. But the point is that for us, this is a legacy project that we want to continue to collect feedback on and really see what the community thinks. And we want to do it at the right time to really move the ideas forward. And then, of course, construction would just be whenever that happens and then after for a long, long time. But as I said, we hope to look more into what phases of the project look like and different steps of the project could be, so that we are getting some of those shorter term wins throughout the project and not just waiting on the full long-term vision, which of course is kind of the ultimate goal as well. So far in the process, we've heard these themes and feedback. These are not decisions that have been made. They are simply things that we have heard pretty consistently from the community that we've talked with. So a lot of these themes are reflected in the current concepts that we have available. So these themes will talk a little bit more with you all as a group, but they're new building development concentrated in the East Zone, a parking structure in the East Zone to support those civic buildings in downtown in general, open space network along the Creek corridor with largest open spaces concentrated in the Central and West zones. The Creekside Amphitheater over in the East Zone, replacing Lions Park baseball fields with open space or other recreational opportunities, and then existing Parfit Park and Vanover Park uses to remain largely unchanged. So again, these are not set in stone by any means, and we'd like to hear your thoughts on these, but they're just some of the themes that we've heard so far. Right now, there's a Create Your Own Corridor survey asking about the location of a few key buildings. So the library, the museum, and the fire department. And really collecting, there's actually 45 different options, the variations, just with those 3 building moves. So the back-end Excel spreadsheet is quite entertaining to see all the different variations that are possible. And that's just with moving those 3 buildings. So I think that really just shows that there's so many different variations of what this could look like, and there's a lot of possibilities. So again, this is just kind of another way of collecting preferences and kind of seeing what the community thinks about where certain uses should go along the corridor. There's also a survey called Revisit Priorities, and that is for people that haven't yet been engaged on the project, haven't participated, and kind of want to weigh in on what the vision is, and starting kind of in those earlier stages. So also for people that already have, we want to keep thinking through those, and if there's something that needs to be added, it's not too late. This isn't a fast-moving, short-term project. This is really something we're taking our time, and we want to hear everybody's voices and really collect all the feedback that's out there. So the Revisit Priorities survey is there as well. And last weekend, I know I saw several of you out on the walking tour, and that was really our idea for engaging with the community in an in-person way that could still be safe and still engaged people along the corridor, and really talked about specific elements and kind of broke down the corridor in ways that were, ways of kind of breaking it down to talk about specific parts, because sometimes it can be overwhelming kind of going back to the 45 different scenarios of moving 3 buildings. There's a lot out there, and so sometimes it's kind of nice to break it into parts and really focus on what the community wants to see in certain areas. So this week we are working on videos that will go at each one of these spots along the corridor that we were at the walking tour. And those videos will be available as well as the exercise that we did that day at that location. So for example, the City Hall lawn location had that design your own corridor exercise. So we'll have that exercise available, and then you'll be able to click on the sign that's there, and it will take you to a video describing what the exercise is from that day last weekend. So that's kind of a way that people can do the little walking tour on their own time in the next few months. Okay, and so now we're going to switch to the feedback portion of this meeting. Give me 1 second. When I was having technical difficulties and logged out, I lost all my saved spots. But I'm close by, so don't worry. Okay, I'm there. Thank you for your patience. I'm here now. Okay, so first we're gonna look at these key priorities or themes in the feedback we've seen so far. Was there anything that jumped out to anyone on this call that they would like to kind of comment on about these kind of themes, or things that you wanted to talk further about or have questions about? Okay. Your time won't be up. You can always come back to those. I'm going to scroll over to the first concept, and we can kind of start walking through that. Okay. Let's move in. Okay, so this is concept 1. And so this one has the library moved a little bit to the west from where it currently is. So the current library is right about here. The museum is placed kind of directly across from the library, and they have a little small festival street between them. We envision that for not events, but maybe like small library type kind of setups or small gatherings in the park, those types of things. And there's mostly open space in between the two. And then there's nature play and expanded open space where the ball fields currently are. And then as we move towards the east side, you'll see Harfoot, Vanover, mostly the same. We have a cultural arts building, City Hall and police, and the fire department are all moved over to the east in this version. There's also a large amphitheater and green space, kind of an extension of Vanover Park that goes through the whole side of the creek here. Go a little closer. There's also significant plaza space over here to the east. And then this is an expanded festival street where Water Street currently is as well. So kind of leading up towards the cultural arts facility and the parking area. Go kind of slow. And then has this museum library in the core here. Steve, do you see the chat box? Is there anything in the chat box yet? Okay, I'm gonna scroll down to number 2. Anybody who would like to make a comment, you're welcome to. Okay, here's concept number 2. So this one, we have the museum is moved across the creek over to where the history park is. The fire department's in its current location, just expanded a little bit. The library is moved much further to the west where the ball fields kind of currently are. There's open space. There's still this enhanced Water Street festival that kind of goes through Parfit Park as well. There's the long Vanover Park extension, and then Cultural Arts, Police, City Hall, and then the fire department's not moved over to the east in this scenario, so that one's still where it currently is. Go ahead, Beth.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, Carly, I just want to thank you for the level of engagement efforts you've initiated and followed through on. These are fantastic. Also, I'm really excited about the Clear Creek Management Plan happening in conjunction with this. And that said, there's 2 ideas on here that I don't think we can look at until we have the Clear Creek management flow involved. And also, I'm all about protecting the historic neighborhoods that border the creek. If we were to put the museum on the south side, that 12th Street historic neighborhood would be impacted. There is already an issue with traffic flow and parking. So this would probably be my least favorite design because of the negative impacts on the historic neighborhood. Moving the library down into what's really the heart of it's Tubing Central right there would be nearly impossible for any library patron to get there on a hot summer day. And the library is very well attended on weekends, so we have to think about those things. And that's the feedback I just wanted to give about this design.
Thank you, Beth. I think those are both good points. Anyone else want to make the comment about this one or any of the past ones? Okay, I'll scroll down to number 3, but feel free to jump in. So concept 3.
Carly?
Yeah.
Sorry, we have people asking some questions on chat. Please make sure it's to everyone. I will go ahead and repost the ones that came to me, but make sure when you're chatting, it's to everyone.
Steve, would you mind grabbing some of those for me?
Oh, I wasn't seeing them yet, so
Okay,
that's the
I
first
see
one.
one now.
Right.
Okay.
The reason behind moving the ball fields, and then the second one is what becomes of the history park back in number 2.
Sure. So the ball fields, the conversation that has been in the community that we've been hearing is that there's not a lot of people that are using the ball fields. It doesn't seem to be a huge group of people that get use of that large area of land that's along the corridor, and that if it was open space or more usable space for more of the community, that it would be of more value. So that's some of the stuff we've heard. We've also heard from people that really like having the ball fields, even if they're not always used, that they kind of like how they look and like to have them there. But again, that the reason why we've kind of heard it brought up to remove them is just the amount of space that they take up and the amount of people that are able to kind of appreciate that space. And then the history park in this version up here. So the idea would be that we would still have the history park, and that we would figure out a way to make them both kind of function in that space. It would, obviously, there would be some things we need to work out space-wise to make sure that all that could fit there. But one of the reasons we've heard this come up as an idea that could be really great is just that the space with the history park, for example, they like to have weddings there, or there's a lot of people that like to use that space for the classes that the History Museum teaches. And they're pretty far away from the actual museum or facilities, and they're a little bit disconnected. And that connecting the two with the museum and then having the history park really a part of it, then it might be able to have more of a cohesive history area that could be maybe better utilized. So that's one of the things that we've kind of heard for that area. Okay, so in this number 3, and I'll keep an eye out for the chat too, so if anybody asks a question. The museum is in its existing place. I'll zoom in a little bit. And the fire department's in its existing place with a little bit of an expansion. And then in this one, the library is actually moved over to the east over here. So still the large amphitheater with open space, so really large Vanover Park extension feeling. A festival street where Water Street is, and then cultural arts and City Hall and police are in the same building, so it's a little bit taller of a building. This is kind of the tallest version of the 3, just because we're fitting a lot more buildings over on this end of the image there. And then, as we said, this is kind of open space. So obviously, like in this plan, for example, the tennis courts are still here, and this could easily be the ball fields to remain the same. There's nothing else there except open space, so it's not really taking the spot of them for anything else. It's just kind of a matter of preference of the community between the two. Anybody have comments or questions about this one or any of them? You can go ahead, Beth.
Hi, just another comment that the neighbors on 10th Street would possibly be impacted by a pavilion now across the street from their homes. Power, and people can plug in and play music in the park, and there could be events there. So just a thought to think about the impact on the neighborhood.
Thank you, Beth. That's a good point. And then I know in one of our last meetings, we were discussing the fire department and whether it should be moved over with city facilities for ease of communication and kind of ease of being close to police. And we were kind of talking about what are the reasons to keep it in the main corridor and what are the reasons to move it. And I remembered one of the reasons that the fire department has talked about being in the same place, and that was the creek. They are, as you know, pretty active on the creek during the summertime. And so having a really close proximity to the creek makes it easier for them to get there quickly for any kind of rescues that need to be made. So that's one reason to be close to the creek. That being said, it's not a large move to move it over to the east, and it likely wouldn't affect response time significantly. The fire department has looked at both locations and at this stage, kind of this initial stage, feel like either one could work and would have advantages to them as for their location. Other questions or comments? One of the questions we hear about a lot is about the library, because obviously they're not part of the city, they're part of the county, and they own their building and their land, and so they likely won't just do whatever we tell them to do. But we have been meeting with them quite frequently, and they're really excited by the possibilities that this could open for them. They've needed a lot more space for the last several years. It's a very used library, as I'm sure all of you know. And so at this point, they really want to hear what the community thinks as well. And if the community supports an expansion for them or a relocation for them, they right now are just interested in hearing the possibilities. A couple of things that they have told us is that they would like it to be one floor for staffing purposes. So when you start making a multi-level library, you need people everywhere. And so it needs to be one floor. And they at first were a little bit hesitant to move towards the east because they really enjoy that proximity to the creek that they have currently. But then when they kind of saw this Manover Park, open space, amphitheater, other uses that could really benefit them and still being fairly close to the creek, I think they kind of are, like I said, interested in all the possibilities. So that's kind of the story behind the library. Dave, will you read Marjorie's comment for me? I think it was Marjorie.
I couldn't find my mouse. Marjorie had said, "Thank you for the walking tour. Putting stickies on maps while on location is so much more meaningful than while in the community center. The concepts were so much easier to visualize on site, and we appreciate that. That was our goal." And then another comment also from Marjorie. "Another reason for GFD, Golden Fire Department, remaining in Central is that as long as it is a volunteer city department, it's great to foster the friendly interaction between the firefighters and folks enjoying time along the corridor."
Great point.
This is Saoirse.
Sure.
I unmuted myself. I think there are I think there are advantages and disadvantages. And I think in the last meeting I attended, we talked about trade-offs, with everything. But I look at the cultural arts. This is just kind of at a visioning level. I look at the cultural arts center being close to the library because I like that because I think that there could be a lot of collaboration between activities through the library and activities through the cultural arts. So it seems like that having them in physical proximity expands their capacity for collaboration, meaningful collaboration. And with the open space area and Vanover Park, I think, it allows them to take it outdoors, which, is always in the realm of creativity is always a good thing. Oh, I see you putting a star there. That's fairly impressive, Alex. So I kind of liked having the library and the museum together too, but I like this configuration for that reason. Oh, and the other thing is I wanted to piggyback on what Beth said in terms of public engagement. I mean, Golden, like, I am so impressed that you know that I care about this issue a lot of community engagement. This is like, you know, other people could take notes from what you're doing. So well done.
Thank you. Those are very nice comments. And I think that's a really good point about the cultural arts facility in the library. I think I could see a lot of cool things. And I really like the amphitheater close by them too, because I like to imagine the library and the amphitheater and cultural arts kind of making a really cool space together. So I agree. That's a good point. So the walking tour concept, we're hoping we can use at later stages of the project as well. When we have, you know, next year or the year after, where we have really a vision for each area that we want to get feedback on, kind of showing that exact view and what that would look like in like a more designed version. Right now, of course, none of our images are heavily designed images. They're still brainstorm images, but I think that could be a cool way of walking the corridor and really looking at what it could look like in the future.
Hi, this is Angela Schwab.
Hi.
Hi. I'm a former member of the Planning Commission and really excited to weigh in. Can I just give my feedback on all three?
Yeah. Yep.
Right now? Okay. So concept 2 is definitely my least favorite for reasons mentioned. You know, the library's in this congested area where the river and the road pinch already, and it's already like tight and slow. And I have favorites in 1 and 3. While I agree with the library and the cultural arts building being close together, I think it puts all the good stuff on the far east, in a way, or just puts more, should say that, the bigger stars all together, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that I think it kind of neglects the rest of the plan. And I think concept 1, I might fiddle with it a little bit, but I like having these 3 hubs of like City Hall and police, I think do go really well together. But then you've got cultural arts in the east zone, museum in the center, library in the west. I might switch library and museum because I think having the museum connect to the bridge that's already there to go across the street to the museum makes sense, or to the history park makes sense. But I just think that this spreading these 3 program buildings uses out creates these highlights along the corridor, and it while you were talking, Carly, I also mapped the walking distance between the new parking that the city has designated by the newly purchased Coors building and like the library, and it's only half a mile, but it does seem like a lot on a hot summer day to park like all the way over there. Does that? And I, you know, I live a mile from downtown and walk some, but on a day that's way too hot, I'm not going to trudge up the hill. And I wonder how parking, I like that there's expanded parking in a couple places on this map. I also like in option 1, how the parking garage like isn't west of the Cultural Arts Center. Like Cultural Arts is right along the river with the gardens and the amphitheater, and parking is in the back because we don't want to prioritize that. I just think that something is really, it's right here to distribute those 3. I would call those, not that they're the best ones, but the library, the museum, and a cultural arts center are the ones that the visitors are going to flock to more, and also I think residents will want to visit often. Of course, we go to City Hall. Of course, we go to the police station and the fire station. But those trips are not as often as I go to the library or museum or cultural arts center. So I really feel strongly that concept one is the best starting point, though I would switch the library and museum because I think it makes the most sense to have the museum by that existing bridge. I also really love this, the open space and parks and that festival street in between the museum and library. I think that enhancing walking will make that half a mile seem a lot less of a distance, but it still seems kind of far to me. So I'm wondering what the public input is on that new parking. Is it used often?
So yeah, Steve could comment a little bit more about the parking. Not surprisingly, parking in our feedback has been kind of one of those things that there's people that feel really strongly that there should be parking kind of all along the corridor. And then there's people that feel really strongly that parking is not the best use of this kind of prime real estate along the creek, and they want it to be moved to a place that's not quite as kind of that core area. So right now we're sort of trying to bridge the gap between those two, but we have heard kind of those two pretty strong opinions about parking. One thing we've discussed as an option, and I know that the exact route is not necessarily popular on this image, but having a bus, a little kind of trolley of some kind that takes people from the parking to the library might be something that could help with those types of issues that we've discussed. But I'll let Steve comment more about parking if you'd like.
Thanks, Angela. Just that, at least in many versions of these, one of the things that happens is things get moved around and there's lots and lots of different versions. But in almost all versions of these areas that are shown as library parking, expanded parking, do have code requirement parking. So that is the intention. The intention is to have sufficient parking near those attractive elements. Obviously our biggest parking impacts, there's day-to-day parking impacts, but the weekend and event parking impacts, which, as Beth rightly suggested, we need to know what our management plan is before we know exactly how much parking we need. But I don't think there's any scenario where we're going to expect most of the people to park remotely. And we will hope some people will park remotely and some people will park conveniently, and some people will actually stop using their car as much and use other modes. But as of now, almost nobody parks over in the surface parking lots. This summer, we put signs out during the time period where we've used the streets for some other uses, but the volume of cars has been much less.
Well, so speaking of alternate transportation, is there an update on that future RTD transit area? I'm kind of out of the loop, but what does that look like?
No, no update. RTD bought the entire railroad corridor from downtown many years ago. So they own the corridor. The railroad has exclusive use of those tracks as long as they want to, which we assume would be a long time. So to bring rail out here would require parallel tracks like has been done on the Gold Line. So it is a very long term, and the reddish shaded area just shows RTD's ownership. But that being said, a shorter term version of a rubber tire connection over to Ward Road is something that we're constantly pushing, because in terms of time from North Golden to downtown, Ward Road is a quicker trip to downtown than the W line is.
Thanks.
Thanks for your comments, Angela. I think those are all really good points. And it reminded me of something we've talked about in this project a couple different times, which is the emerald necklace, meaning that there are kind of jewels along the corridor that people can kind of stop at, and emeralds because we want it to be very green and connected with green space kind of all along the creek. So we've sort of kind of playfully called it an emerald necklace a couple times. So your comments reminded me of that.
Yeah, I think it makes the whole plan more desirable to know that instead of, I know a half a mile is not far, right? But have young kids, and the more that I can break up that walk with something to do or a place to play, and granted it would take us all day to walk the mile there and back, but breaking it up with park, garden, museum, library, you're not going to visit all those places, but at least you're not just like to get to the other end, right? I think it activates the whole space, the whole corridor more evenly. I love the emerald necklace.
Hey, this is Beth again. I just want to put in my vote for gardens. I love that idea and would like to see more xeriscaped garden areas in replace of the ball fields rather than a pavilion. And if anything, small gathering places instead of a large pavilion with natural xeriscaped gardens that would be closer to Colorado landscaping.
Thanks. Marjorie, did I see your hand? You're on mute. Sorry. Okay.
I'm kind of distracted because I'm looking out at the Chimney Gulch Trail Hut at 2 police cars, a sheriff's car, an ambulance, and animal control, and they're going down the trail. So don't know what's happening, but it's a lot of flashing lights going on.
Yikes.
But this is kind of a follow-on about the comparison of all these concepts. I might have missed the rationale, but one of the presenters at the tour said, well, the sheriff's department is leaving. One of the presenters at the tour said that they felt like there was a logic behind each one of these concepts. But I didn't hear the follow-up of how would you identify each of these concepts? What is the logic behind 1, 2, and 3? Do they have titles or intents, or I'm just not sure of those.
So I think the 3 concepts that were before this stage had kind of more of a title, that a little bit what you're kind of like a concentration to it.
Yes.
We got an update that it was a bicycle crash with an injury.
Oh, okay. Well, I can turn it around and you can watch. That's
so I think at this stage, the reason why they're not more kind of titled and identified is we really want to do more of this this game that we're kind of playing right now, where we're breaking it up and picking good parts and bad parts. And so we've been really trying not to have the concepts be over identified as a certain type of concept with a certain idea. We really want to have variations and talk through kind of pieces of what we like, because we feel like we're kind of earlier in the process than maybe settling on a concept with a focus. And does that get at your answer a little bit? Can you clarify a little more if you're?
It does in a way, but I would like to hear the claimed logic behind each one of the concepts. I mean, you weren't just moving pieces around. There was
right
in concept 1 and concept 2 and concept 3, but I'm not sure what that reason is for any of the concepts.
So I guess if you're referring to kind of the process to get here, so we had 3 concepts before this round, And that's where we kind of got the feedback as far as moving the buildings to the east and some of the points that we have done. So for the themes that we kind of referred to for Parfit Park and Vanover Park. So that's partly kind of how we got here. Steve, do you want to elaborate more on that?
No, I was going to confess that I don't remember that early on with a few weeks ago with these themes, and I think it might have been Mark had defined some sort of theme within a theme for these three. And I apologize, I don't recall what they are. I've just looked at them as, as Angela was saying, based on where the more community-based elements are placed. So I don't doubt that the consultant had a logic, but I don't remember what it is. We'll ask them this week.
Thank you.
We'll get a better answer for you, Marjorie.
Hi, this is Tracy Case and Pete Gottsef. Pete has served on the Parks and Rec Board for many years. I served on historic preservation, sustainability, a bunch of things. I've even lost track. Just some thoughts. We both gravitate towards 1 and 3, sort of following on Angela's comments of spreading out some of the exciting parts of the plan, but also minimizing impacts on the local neighborhoods, both historic and just the sensitivity, knowing that the local neighborhoods deal with all the parking woes and challenges currently. So just respecting that. We also like the idea of the kind of the business end, to do city business, separating that from the recreational users, because when you need to go get something done, it's nice to just go and get your business done on the east side of town. So we'd like that the city hall and the police are grouped together, just to kind of, if you need to go do something, you can get in there and get out quickly. And I do think, along with Angela's comments, people seem to not like the distant parking, but intellectually, it seems like the best solution because you want to move all those cars out of the downtown corridor. I just don't know what the answer is on that, because it doesn't seem like the surface lots are getting used as much with all that space out there, even this summer, that the cars just don't want to go there. The drivers don't want to. So thanks for letting us weigh in. We appreciate this opportunity. You want to add anything?
Thank you.
Hi, this is Karen Oxman.
Hi, Karen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So were the consultants given any direction about possibly utilizing existing buildings, either as is or with expansion, so that you're not rebuilding everything? Were they given, or was it to be more a pie in the sky? If we could dream and had all the money in the world, we could tear down all the buildings and start over, because there are so many buildings that I think could be preserved in the use that they have, and not have to start over with everything.
Yeah, so I think for the sake of variation, there is some of these, as you know, that have the museum or the fire department in their existing location and reusing the building. The library has those significant space issues where we were really kind of looking at other options for the library specifically. But I think in general, we view the reuse of buildings as definitely something we want to talk more about and think through. And possibly that's part of kind of costing or phasing parts of the project, where we're looking at what does the cost look like to reuse some of these buildings versus building new, and what are the kind of trade-offs between them. And as I said, that's not the case for all the buildings. Some of them are in a better place than others. But I think we're definitely not taking that off the table. Reusing the buildings is something that we are still having conversations about. Steve, did you want to answer any more to that?
Just with the exception of the very large building at
Yes.
311 10th Street. And even on the walking tour, I was hearing, it's a real interesting challenge between City Hall, the museum, and the library. Which of those you would want to try to reuse and how it would fit. For example, in the view we're looking at now, where the museum is shown, could easily be a reuse of part or all of City Hall. So it is a great conversation. If we were to reuse all three of those, it really does eliminate the library and museum, especially, well, either as shown or flipped, as Angela suggested, being kind of bookends of this central core. The other thing to think about is time. This is a pretty long-term plan, and it may take a long time to get there.
So we might need to use the buildings for a while until the other ones are built.
Or right, it may be a phased.
Right. Saoirse?
Yeah, I also just want to say, like, I think a part of the conversation, I mean, I totally understand what Karen is saying in terms of like reusing and how that impacts costs and all that. But I'm also looking out, since this is a long-term project, like we know that the buildings that were built 40 years ago have significant challenges in terms of sustainability, bringing things up in terms of sustainability measures. And so the opportunity to build with that idea in mind of a building that is cost efficient and I'm not finding the right words, but you understand what I mean, is that it saves energy and becomes efficient in terms of energy use and human use for that matter. But that's a far thinking kind of vision for the city. So.
Thank you. I think that's a good point. And I think that'll be what's interesting when we're looking at more of the costs. When we see the difference between maybe some of those key buildings and what it takes to reuse them or build new and comparing that, sometimes that changes the conversation a little bit. I know Dave wants to talk, and Angela, I see your hand too. Go ahead, Angela.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback on that a little bit, that as an architect, we hear this with clients a lot to want to reuse or expand, remodel an existing building, and it doesn't it doesn't make great sense, but a lot of times it's less expensive to just start new, as hard as that is to believe. And as much as we don't want it to be true, because it doesn't seem like the most efficient use of time and money and space, and there's all of that energy already in the building that you're getting rid of. But I would also argue that the library especially would benefit from being designed from scratch. A library has so many conditions and requirements to have in order to have a really pleasant space, but also functional as a library. And the librarians were talking about staffing. You'd want to design the building from the librarian's standpoint, and then also the users. But yeah, and I think that was the result of the study on the Coors building that you purchased, right? I didn't work on that project, but I had colleagues that did, and I think the findings were that it's not financially, doesn't make a ton of sense to try to make the building be what it's not. So, but I think public messaging around that is going to be really important. City of Golden residents feel really strongly about a lot of stuff, and one of them is parking, and another is I'm going to say just like the unnecessary destruction of buildings to open up space. And I think it's the best part of this project is we have the opportunity to really clear some areas and protect them. I realize I'm going over my time, but one other thing I want to ask is when I've read about the project previously, a long time ago. I'm not citing a specific example, but people are really concerned that like there are going to be like high density apartments put in, or when people talk about workforce housing or affordable housing, it's like, oh, they're just going to hand it over to developers, right? That's the easy broad brushstroke response. And that's something that I'm interested in knowing how the city is going to message about, because that's clearly not in any of the plans, but the public perception is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You're right. That is something we hear. And usually when we talk about the project with people under various circumstances, it's, oh, this is interesting. I thought you were, but I'm worried if the city gets in trouble, they still might sell all the land to a developer. And so I think even with kind of understanding, there is that fear. And so I think that you're absolutely right, that that's something that we really need to address and make sure that people understand that that's not in our plans at all. And no one in the community's really made a loud cry for high-end apartments all along the creek. So thanks.
Yeah, I guess it's just my paranoia of mine about the project is that it's getting sidetracked, or would be more sidetracked in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's legitimate. Thank you. Dave, I know you've been patient. I'm sorry. Did you want to share your thoughts? You're on mute. Sorry.
Okay. A couple questions. One, when you talk about the cultural arts thing over there, what does that envision or include? I mean, that cultural arts could be a wide variety. I mean, and so I'd kind of like to understand that a little more.
Sure. So right now it's called cultural arts to be super broad and kind of wide. We really feel like this is one of those key areas that we'd want to do a lot more into and kind of dive into what the community wants to see, because we've heard a lot of different things and needs and ideas from the community that they want to see. And some of it's performing arts space, some of it is visual art space, some of it is event space or rental space, conference space. These are all kind of things that we've heard thrown out there. And there's also a lot of different ways that could look. That could be the city renting space, that could be cultural entities kind of using the building for their uses. There's a lot of different ways it could look. And so right now, we have kind of blocked space for cultural art space with the idea that we need to dive more into what that means and what the community really wants to see in that space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Another question was regarding moving the fire department. I know in previous conversations we've had about moving the fire station, there was always a reluctance to want to move it from where it was because of the fear that it would impact response time, especially up to Highway 58 and to Washington Avenue, and moving it to the east would probably increase their response rate where they are now. And I just wondered what their change of thought on that was.
I think that's a really good point. We have heard that several times. One of them would be we'd have to look at if there are changes we could make in the streets that could, is there some improved connections that could improve times? And then we'd really need to study more specifically about what the time difference would look like and what are some of the ways we could address it. So there's definitely more work to be done in that area. In general, the fire department was willing to, they felt that both spots provided some advantages that they could see being impactful to response times in a positive way. So I agree that we definitely would need some more study into that.
Yeah, and the last thing is that been mentioned early on about the Clear Creek Management Plan. And I think that is so critical to this whole thing, including, getting some type of a tax measure in funding or approved. If we don't do improvements along Clear Creek and how we manage that and everything, my opinion is going to be really difficult to get any type of tax increase approved to fund this project.
That's a really good point. I think that you're right that tying the two together and people seeing really those short-term and long-term benefits to the improvements along the corridor could be really significant for that for us. It's a good point. Thank you. Did you have another?
No, that'll do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, one question from Stace Pete Gotza. So maybe, let's see, I think it was 2012 when we were on Parks and Rec, we had wrapped up the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan. Did anyone actually look at that before they threw this out? Well, you know, everything changes, right? And
yeah.
my only observation here, and that what was captured, is the connectivity that we were trying to create along the corridor. You know, it's like, well, where do the city buildings go? I don't know. We didn't have any idea, but they were going to go somewhere. Then someone found this spot down here on the east side. But so it's pretty remarkable. I just hope it actually happens. Like at the time, it was just sort of a fanciful vision, including the 8th Street connection, which obviously that'll never happen. But I think this is a really extraordinary use of the east end of this city. But the connectivity has been captured, and for me, being on Parks and Rec, at least, you know, all the other pieces are very difficult to put together as far as understanding how anything will actually work. I have an idea, but you know, and until you see someone else, it's like you want someone else to try it, but nobody's built like us, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's constrained east, west, north, south, and then bracketed by a giant industrial facility that makes beer. But, I just wanted to say thanks for, I don't know if you looked at the master plan, but thanks for bringing the connectivity in.
Thank you for that comment. And I can promise you, we absolutely have been looking at the other plan. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I think that it is, you know, the core of a lot of these, as far as that open space in the middle. That was something that really came out of that plan, that people really wanted that increased open space in the core area. And we didn't know if people still felt that way. We kind of wondered if people had changed their mind about that, or if there were some different uses that people wanted in that central area, or to have more buildings. And in this process, you know, we've heard that they want limited buildings really in that core area, which really does track with that last process. So I think it really has fed into this. And I think that your work has helped make this happen, and you should feel proud.
Well, it wasn't my work. It was our work. It was actually, I forget the name of the consultant. They were good, but this is looking good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I know we're hitting at about an hour. I really appreciate everybody's time. Angela, did you want to?
I have one more. I wanted to piggyback on, I think Beth said this earlier on about the gardens. That's something that every time there's been a survey about this project, I talk about gardens. And it's easy to look at a plan and see green and think it means lawn, right? And I know that's obviously not what this is, but I would love in the next iteration, or the next time this comes back to the public, to have photos of what these types of spaces and gardens could look like. And I'm sure that's the next step, right, as you start to refine it. But you know, like Beth said, I think it was Beth who said it's like wild gardens and Colorado gardens. And not to really, the reason I leave Golden is to go to the Denver Botanic Gardens, either at York Street or Chatfield. And if there's something like that in Golden, like really special, and you know, wildlife habitats, really, that would be remarkable to put that in the heart of the city. So further definition of what the garden spaces are like, I think will also hopefully help sell this.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. Thank you for that. We have been hesitant kind of at this point, just right now, like I said, we're trying to keep it broad and really get people's kind of overall ideas and not be over designed thinking that we've moved too far ahead, right? We want to make sure that people understand we're early on. But I think those are great points, and that could really help people envision what it would look like. And then I did see a question about, do private businesses have a place in any of these plans? That they've heard beer garden and some other comments, but do private businesses have a place at all? And right now we have those surplus areas. I don't know if you can remember on the concepts, but over on the east side, there are some set areas that say surplus land. And it's possible that those could include some businesses or housing of some kind. We started to collect some feedback on that at the walking tour, because there are people that have these questions and kind of want to know if there's some opportunity for other uses besides civic uses. And then, of course, there are people that feel really strongly that they do not want them included. And so it sounds like from what we've been hearing that that would most likely go towards the east side, but of course, open to hearing different ideas out in the community. Okay, I just, again, wanted to tell everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and provide your comments. You all have spent a ton of time for Golden, and it's really valuable to hear what you all think. And we hope to engage with you all again as we progress in this project. As we said, this is going to be a long time. So we'd love to meet with you guys again and hear your follow-up feedback and see where we're at in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much for including us. And you know, the pace of this project, I think, is really going to help you. That it's not rushed. Not that the pandemic is a convenience in any way, but it's helpful, honestly, to slow this down, especially just with everything going on, to have this just going in the background and people can keep weighing in. And the fact that you opened up a survey to get like first opinions again for people who feel like they missed it the first time, like you're doing a great job with communication. And that is one of the biggest pieces of just visioning this is your communication.
Thank you.
So
very nice. Thanks.
Thanks.